Space is the ultimate hostile environment. We see the stunning visuals and dream of exploration, but behind the beauty lies a reality filled with hidden perils. This journey will reveal 25 hidden dangers in space you should know about, from invisible radiation that rewrites your DNA to the slow psychological decay of confinement. By the end, you will understand the true price of stepping into the void and what it will take for humanity to survive out there. What unseen force could turn a speck of dust into a deadly weapon? And how does the silence of deep space threaten the human mind? The cosmos does not care if we live or die, so what does that indifference mean for our future among the stars? The first and perhaps most insidious danger is not something you can see or feel. It is a silent, invisible rain that never stops, a torrent of atomic shrapnel moving at nearly the speed of light. This is cosmic radiation, the background noise of a violent universe, and it is the single greatest biological threat to any astronaut venturing beyond the protective cradle of Earth. Our planet's magnetic field and thick atmosphere act as a perfect shield, deflecting and absorbing this deadly barrage, but step outside that bubble and you are exposed. There are two primary sources of this peril. The first comes from our own sun in the form of solar particle events. Think of these as cosmic tantrums, sudden and violent eruptions on the sun's surface that can hurl billions of tons of charged particles directly at us. With little warning, radiation levels inside a spacecraft could spike to lethal doses in a matter of hours. A storm of protons that can cause acute radiation sickness, damaging organs and overwhelming the body's defenses. The second source is even more relentless. Galactic cosmic rays are the background radiation of deep space, originating from cataclysmic events like supernova and black holes across the galaxy. These are not mere protons, but the nuclei of heavy elements like iron, stripped of their electrons and accelerated to unimaginable energies. They are so powerful they can punch straight through a spacecraft hull, through your body and out the other side. When one of these microscopic bullets tears through your cells, it does not just break things, it shatters them. It can slice directly through your DNA, causing complex double-strand breaks that your body struggles to repair. This accumulated damage is a ticking time bomb, dramatically increasing the lifetime risk of cancers like leukemia, causing cataracts that cloud vision, and recent studies suggest it may even lead to degenerative brain diseases, impairing cognition and memory over long missions. And it is not just flesh and blood at risk. This same radiation can play havoc with the delicate electronics that keep astronauts alive. A single high-energy particle can flip a 1 to a 0 in a computer's memory, causing a phantom command, a system glitch, or a total failure. Shielding against this is a monumental challenge. Lead is too heavy, and most materials simply cause the particles to splinter into a secondary shower of even more radiation. So astronauts live with a constant, measurable background of cellular destruction, a price paid in real time for every moment spent gazing at the stars. This invisible killer forces a fundamental question: how do you build a shelter from a storm you cannot see, one that comes from every direction at once? But the human body faces a far more personal rebellion in the weightless void, a slow unlearning of its very design. Microgravity is a biological lie, a state our evolution never prepared us for, and its toll is a systematic dismantling. Without the constant pull of Earth, your body begins to believe it is in a permanent state of freefall, and it starts to shed what it deems unnecessary. Your muscles, no longer needed to fight gravity or even to stand, begin to waste away in a process called atrophy. More alarmingly, your skeleton, the very framework that holds you up, begins to dissolve. Astronauts can lose bone mineral density at a staggering rate of 1 to 2% per month, a condition akin to accelerated osteoporosis. The minerals, primarily calcium, leach into the bloodstream, posing risks for kidney stones and leaving bones brittle and fragile, a terrifying prospect for a long mission or a return to a world with gravity. Meanwhile, the fluid distribution in your body, always pulled downward by gravity, experiences a sudden and confusing shift. Freed from that pull, fluids migrate upward toward your head and chest. This causes the characteristic puffy face and bird legs appearance of astronauts, but the consequences are more than cosmetic. This increased pressure in the skull can press on the backs of the eyes, flattening them and damaging the optic nerve. Many astronauts return with permanently changed vision, a condition now recognized as spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome. Your cardiovascular system also grows lazy. The heart does not have to work as hard to pump blood against gravity, so it weakens. Blood vessels lose their tone. When an astronaut finally returns to Earth, this deconditioning can lead to severe dizziness, fainting, and an inability to stand, as the body struggles to remember how to manage blood pressure under the crushing weight of a full gravity. The countermeasures are as brutal as the problem itself. Astronauts strap themselves into resistance machines and treadmill harnesses for over 2 hours of intense, daily exercise, fighting to convince their bodies that the work is still necessary. They are essentially running a marathon every few days just to slow the decay. But these heroic efforts are just that, a slowing. They cannot stop the process entirely. The body in space is in a state of continuous, if managed, decline. This raises a profound and unsettling question. If a trip to Mars takes many months, what condition will the first explorers be in when they finally step onto the red soil? And will their bodies even be strong enough to let them stand up? While your body battles an invisible enemy from within, your spacecraft faces a relentless physical assault from outside. The orbital highways around our planet are no longer pristine. They have become a shooting gallery filled with hypervelocity shrapnel. This is the growing peril of space debris, and it threatens to trigger a catastrophic chain reaction known as Kessler syndrome. Imagine one collision between two defunct satellites. That impact does not just create two broken objects, it creates thousands of new, smaller fragments, each now a high-speed projectile in its own right. These pieces then increase the probability of hitting other objects, which in turn creates even more debris. The fear is a cascading domino effect, where a single event could eventually render entire orbits so densely packed with junk that they become impassable, effectively trapping humanity on Earth. The sheer speed is what makes even the smallest object lethal. In low Earth orbit, objects are traveling at roughly 17,500 miles per hour. At that velocity, a fleck of paint no larger than a grain of sand strikes with the energy of a bowling ball dropped from a several-story building. It can pit and crack the reinforced windows of the International Space Station. A marble-sized object, perhaps a lost bolt or a fragment of an old rocket body, carries the kinetic punch of a compact car moving at 60 miles per hour. A direct hit from something that size would be catastrophic, ripping through hulls and critical systems. Today, space surveillance networks are actively tracking over 27,000 pieces of debris larger than a softball, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Estimates suggest there are over 1 million fragments between the size of a marble and a softball, and a staggering 130 million pieces down to the size of that paint fleck, all too small to track reliably with current technology. This is the haunting reality for every mission. The International Space Station, our permanent outpost in the sky, is a frequent target. Its crews have grown accustomed to the routine alarm of a conjunction warning when tracking data predicts a piece of debris will pass within a predefined risk zone. When the threat is high enough, the entire station must fire its thrusters to move slightly up or down, a delicate and fuel-consuming dance called a debris avoidance maneuver. It has performed dozens of these maneuvers over its lifetime, a stark testament to the crowded and dangerous environment we have created. Every satellite launch, every discarded rocket stage adds to this slow-motion pollution. The question becomes not just how we protect our spacecraft from this man-made meteor shower, but how we can possibly begin to clean it up before a single collision locks the celestial door behind us. This silent siege on the mind is a danger no physical shield can block. Beyond the radiation and the bodily decay, space presents a profound psychological trap. The slow erosion of the human spirit inside a metal can hurtling through absolute darkness. The environment itself is a recipe for mental strain, a tiny, unchanging habitat shared with the same few faces for months or years on end. Every surface is hard, every smell is familiar, and every day follows the same rigid schedule under artificial lights, with no true night or day, no wind, no rain, no change of season. In this sensory desert, the mind can begin to turn inward in unhealthy ways. Some astronauts report a phenomenon informally called space fog, a persistent mental sluggishness or difficulty concentrating that goes beyond simple fatigue. It is a cognitive haze potentially linked to the fluid shifts in the brain and the constant stress of the environment, making complex problem-solving feel like wading through syrup. Then there are the people, your only human connection for millions of miles. In such intense, inescapable proximity, minor irritations, a peculiar habit, a tone of voice, the way someone eats can fester into deep-seated resentment. Conflicts that would be resolved with a walk outside or time apart on Earth have nowhere to go, simmering in the recycled air. History has shown that even the most rigorously selected crews are not immune, with documented instances of silent treatments, factions forming, and astronauts burying themselves in work just to avoid interaction. Perhaps the most uniquely cosmic psychological challenge is the view itself. Gazing at Earth from orbit, that stunning blue marble hanging in the black void, can trigger the overview effect, a cognitive shift where borders vanish and the fragility of our planet becomes viscerally real. For many, it is a transcendent, life-changing moment of unity and awe. But for others, that same vista can induce a crushing sense of isolation and existential smallness. Seeing your entire world, everyone and everything you have ever known, reduced to a silent, distant sphere can make you feel profoundly disconnected, a lonely spectator to the only home you will ever have. Combating this mental attrition is as critical as managing oxygen levels. Mission planners invest enormous effort in crew selection, seeking not just technical skill but emotional stability and social compatibility. Constant, though delayed, communication with family and support teams on Earth provides a lifeline. Modern missions are experimenting with virtual reality environments, offering astronauts a few precious minutes to walk through a forest, sit by a virtual ocean, or visit a simulated hometown, a digital escape to trick the mind into feeling grounded. The question is whether these measures are enough. Can we truly prepare the human psyche for a journey where the destination is years away, and the only constant is the hum of machinery and the faces of a handful of companions, while the beautiful, haunting view of home slowly shrinks to a mere star in the endless night? The silence of deep space is not an empty silence, it is an active, predatory force waiting for the smallest weakness in your armor. While Hollywood often depicts explosive decompression or instant freezing, the true danger of the vacuum is a more methodical and gruesome sequence of failures, a brutal demonstration of physics on the human body. It begins not with a bang, but with the absence of pressure. Here on Earth, the weight of our atmosphere presses on every square inch of us, about 14.7 pounds per square inch at sea level. This pressure keeps the fluids in our body in a liquid state. In the vacuum of space, that external pressure drops to zero. Without it, the boiling point of those fluids plummets. This triggers a horrifying phenomenon called ebullition, where the saliva on your tongue, the moisture in your eyes, and the fluids just beneath your skin begin to boil away at your own body temperature. You would not feel cold. In fact, you might initially feel a strange warmth from the vaporization, but your body would swell to nearly twice its normal size as water vapor forms under the skin, a condition called gross swelling. Your lungs, if you made the fatal mistake of holding your breath, would rupture from the inside as the air within them expands violently, tearing the delicate tissues. More immediately lethal is the issue of air itself. In a rapid decompression, the oxygen in your bloodstream is pulled out in seconds. Your brain, the most oxygen-hungry organ, is starved. This is hypoxia. You would have perhaps 10 to 15 seconds of useful consciousness, a brief window of disorientation and fading vision before blacking out. Death from asphyxiation would follow in 1 to 2 minutes. Contrary to the dramatic myth, you would not freeze instantly either. In the vacuum, there is no air to conduct heat away from your body. You would lose heat only very slowly through radiation, meaning you would likely succumb to the other effects long before freezing became a concern. The absolute criticality of a pressure suit becomes terrifyingly clear. It is not merely an oxygen supply, it is a portable, personal atmosphere, a miniature Earth that must maintain that life-giving 14.7 pounds per square inch around your entire body at all times. A pinhole leak, a failed seal on a glove, a micrometeorite puncture, any of these could initiate this deadly cascade. Every spacecraft hull, every airlock, every suit joint is therefore a fortress wall against nothingness. This danger underscores a chilling truth about space exploration. Our survival is measured in seconds, maintained by a fragile bubble of technology holding back an infinite, sucking void that treats our biology as a temporary inconvenience. The vacuum that threatens to boil your blood also creates a climate of impossible extremes, a world without moderation. In space, there is no atmosphere to gently distribute warmth or to carry heat away. An object is either bathed in the unfiltered fury of the sun or cast into the deep freeze of eternal shadow. This means a spacecraft in orbit can have one side blistering at over 250 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to fry electronics and warp metal, while the opposite side, just a few feet away, simultaneously plunges to 250 degrees below zero, a cold so profound it makes metals brittle and shatters plastics. This is not a gradual change, it is an instantaneous line, the terminator between day and night, where survival depends on not crossing from one brutal reality into the other. Managing this seesaw of temperatures is one of the most critical and constant engineering battles in spaceflight. Every system, from the smallest computer chip to the living, breathing astronauts inside, must be kept within a narrow, survivable range, roughly room temperature. The solution is a symphony of active and passive systems known as thermal control. Passive measures come first, like the iconic gold or silver foil you see wrapped around satellites and modules. This multilayer insulation is not for warmth as we think of it, but to reflect the sun's intense heat away and to trap the spacecraft's own internal heat from escaping into the cold void. It acts like a high-tech thermos, but for an entire vehicle. Yet insulation alone is not enough. The machinery and human bodies inside constantly generate heat that must be dumped overboard, or the spacecraft would cook itself from the inside out. This is where radiators come in, those sleek, wing-like panels often seen on space stations. They work on a simple but vital principle, radiating infrared heat directly into space. Their surfaces are carefully engineered to be terrible at absorbing solar heat but excellent at emitting the internal waste heat. They are the spacecraft's air conditioning, silently bleeding warmth into the infinite cold. But when the vehicle slips into the shadow of Earth, into that long orbital night, the problem flips. Now the danger is losing too much heat. Without internal sources, everything would rapidly freeze. So electric heaters, often thousands of them, are strategically placed throughout the craft, flicking on automatically to keep pipes from freezing, thrusters from seizing, and the air itself from becoming a liquid. The entire vehicle is in a perpetual, energy-intensive dance, balancing between two abysses. A single failure in this thermal ballet, a radiator that fails to deploy or a heater circuit that shorts out, can cascade into mission failure in hours. The spacecraft itself must be a master of climate, creating a tiny, fragile pocket of earthly moderation while suspended between fire and ice. The very ground of other worlds holds a hidden poison, a danger that clings and infiltrates long after you have left the surface. This is not your average dirt, it is alien regolith, and its unique properties make it one of the most persistent and underestimated threats to planetary exploration. On the Moon, the dust is a product of billions of years of bombardment by micrometeorites in an airless environment. Without wind or water to smooth the edges, each tiny particle is like a shard of broken glass, jagged and sharp. But that is only half the problem. Constantly bathed in solar radiation and the solar wind, this dust becomes electrostatically charged. It levitates off the surface and clings with a stubborn, almost magnetic attraction to everything it touches, coating spacesuits, lens covers, and equipment in a fine, gray, abrasive grit. For the Apollo astronauts, it was a constant nuisance. It got into the seals of their helmets and suits, it scratched their visors, and when tracked back into the lunar module, it filled the air with an acrid, gunpowder-like smell. They called the reaction lunar hay fever, suffering from sneezing, watery eyes, and sore throats from breathing the suspended particles inside their cabin. Over a long-term mission, this abrasive quality could be catastrophic, slowly grinding down critical suit joints, degrading seals, and fouling sensitive machinery. Mars presents a different and perhaps more sinister kind of dust. The Martian atmosphere allows for global dust storms that can engulf the entire planet for months. This dust is incredibly fine, like talcum powder, and it is pervasive. It would coat every solar panel, seep into every moving part, and inevitably find its way into a habitat. The greater concern, however, is its chemistry. Martian soil is now known to contain significant amounts of perchlorates, salts that are highly toxic to the human thyroid gland. Inhaling this dust, even in small quantities, could disrupt hormone production and lead to serious long-term health issues. Imagine a future astronaut on Mars finishing a day of work outside. They go through a meticulous decontamination airlock, but some dust, invisible to the eye, remains on their suit. Inside the habitat, it settles, gets stirred up, and is breathed in over months or years. The risk is not an acute poisoning, but a slow, cumulative toxicity that could undermine the health of an entire crew. This dust is more than a cleaning problem. It is an environmental hazard that must be locked out, a reminder that the soil of another world is not just landscape, it is a hostile chemical agent waiting for a chance to come inside. How do you build a home on a foundation that is actively trying to wear you down and sicken you? Our star is not a gentle companion, it is a volatile sphere of nuclear fire with a temper. The sun regularly unleashes storms of such ferocity they can reshape the space around planets, and for anyone caught outside Earth's protective embrace, these events represent one of the most acute and sudden dangers imaginable. This is the dual threat of solar flares and coronal mass ejections, two faces of the same explosive anger. A solar flare is a sudden, intense flash. Think of it as a cosmic lightning bolt of radiation, primarily in the form of X-rays and extreme ultraviolet light. It travels at the speed of light, reaching Earth or a spacecraft in just over 8 minutes. This blast can immediately disrupt radio communications, scramble satellite electronics, and bathe an astronaut in a surge of high-energy photons. But the more dangerous sibling is the coronal mass ejection. A CME is not a flash of light, it is a physical eruption. The sun belches out a billion-ton cloud of its own magnetized plasma, a seething bubble of charged particles hurled into space at millions of miles per hour. This cloud is the real monster. It takes anywhere from half a day to several days to cross the void between the sun and Earth. When it arrives, it does not just deliver radiation, it brings a tsunami of magnetic force. Here on Earth, we are blissfully shielded. Our planet's robust magnetic field acts as a deflector shield, bending the incoming charged particles toward the poles and creating the beautiful auroras, while our thick atmosphere absorbs what little gets through. For astronauts in low Earth orbit, like those on the International Space Station, they are still mostly within this magnetic bubble. They receive a higher dose, but they are largely protected from the worst of a direct hit. The peril becomes existential the moment you leave that safe harbor. A crew on a journey to the Moon or Mars would have no such protection. They would be in interplanetary space, exposed in their thin-skinned vessel. A direct hit from a powerful coronal mass ejection could funnel lethal levels of radiation into the spacecraft. The dose could be hundreds of times higher than the annual limit for radiation workers on Earth, delivered in a matter of hours. Acute radiation sickness would set in swiftly with nausea, vomiting, and hemorrhaging, followed by the collapse of bone marrow and the immune system. In a worst-case scenario without adequate shelter, it could be a mission-ending and life-ending event. The only defense on a long-duration spacecraft is a designated storm shelter. This would be a small, heavily shielded compartment, perhaps lined with the spacecraft's own water supply or polyethylene, materials rich in hydrogen that are excellent at stopping penetrating particles. The crew might have only a few hours of warning from solar monitoring satellites to retreat into this cramped sanctuary and wait out the storm, which could last for days. The greatest challenge, however, is prediction. While we can see these eruptions forming on the Sun, forecasting exactly when one will erupt, how powerful it will be, and whether its path will intersect with a spacecraft's trajectory is still an imperfect science. It is like trying to predict which specific bubble will rise to the surface in a pot of boiling water and which direction it will drift. An astronaut crew millions of miles from home would be gambling with the fury of their own star, hoping their early warning systems are correct and that their tiny shelter is thick enough to save them from a storm that can travel from the Sun to Earth in less time than it takes to fly across an ocean. This relentless migration of fluids toward the head does more than cause a puffy face. It presses on the very windows to the soul, threatening to permanently cloud an astronaut's sight. One of the most medically alarming discoveries of the modern space age is a condition formerly known as spaceflight-associated neuro-ocular syndrome, or SANS. It reveals that microgravity's assault is not just on bones and muscles, but on the delicate, pressurized system of the human eye and brain. The mechanism is a brutal lesson in human plumbing. On Earth, gravity constantly pulls about 2/3 of your body's fluids down into your legs and lower torso. In space, that pull vanishes. Fluids redistribute evenly, and the body's regulatory systems, confused by the lack of a downward signal, allow extra fluid to accumulate in the head and chest. This increases the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid that bathes the brain and spinal cord. That increased pressure, in turn, pushes against the back of the eyeball, where the optic nerve connects to the retina. Imagine a water balloon being gently squeezed at one end. The shape distorts. That is essentially what happens to the eye. For many astronauts, this pressure causes the eyeball itself to flatten slightly, and the optic nerve sheath, the protective tube around the nerve, becomes swollen. The retina can develop folds, and blood vessels in the eye can change. The result is often a significant shift in vision. Astronauts who had perfect 20/20 vision can find themselves becoming farsighted, struggling to read checklists or see instruments clearly up close. For some, the changes are temporary, reversing over months after returning to Earth's gravity. But for a concerning number of astronauts, the damage does not fully heal. Their vision is permanently altered, a lifelong souvenir from their time in orbit. This is not a minor inconvenience, it is a career-ending and mission-jeopardizing risk. Piloting a spacecraft, conducting intricate repairs, or performing scientific research all depend on sharp, reliable eyesight. the specter of sands casts a long shadow over plans for a multi-year voyage to Mars. A crew could launch with perfect vision, but after the many months of transit in microgravity, arrive at the red planet with degraded eyesight, struggling to land safely or perform precise surface operations. Even more worrying, we do not yet know if the changes plateau or continue to worsen over durations longer than the typical 6-month station stay. Could 2 years in space lead to blindness? Researchers are racing for answers, studying the fluid dynamics in the skull with advanced ultrasounds on orbit, testing lower body negative pressure devices that use suction to pull fluids back toward the legs, and investigating medications that might reduce cerebrospinal fluid production. The human eye, evolved over millions of years to see under the constant pull of gravity, is sending us a stark warning through the blurred vision of our explorers. We built machines to survive the void, but can we protect the fragile, fluid-filled globe of the eye itself from the silent pressure of living in freefall? Even the germs we bring with us are changed by the void. In the sterile-looking environment of a spacecraft, a silent and unsettling evolution is underway, where the microorganisms living on and inside the astronauts begin to behave in strange and dangerous new ways. This is not about alien pathogens, but about our own familiar bacteria and fungi turning against us in the confined ecosystem of a spaceship. Microgravity itself seems to act as a trigger, altering how these microbes grow, communicate, and attack. Laboratory experiments on the International Space Station have revealed that common bacteria like Salmonella, a frequent cause of food poisoning, can become significantly more virulent in space. They seem to activate different genetic pathways, changing their shape and improving their ability to invade host tissues, effectively becoming better at making you sick. The reason is still being unraveled, but scientists believe the low fluid shear environment of microgravity, where liquids do not flow or mix as they do on Earth, tricks the bacteria into a state similar to when they are moving through your intestinal tract, priming them for infection. At the same time, these microbes band together. On Earth, bacteria often live as free-floating individual cells, but in space, they have a heightened tendency to form dense, slimy communities called biofilms. Picture the stubborn film on a forgotten toothbrush or the slick layer inside a drain pipe, but now coating critical air filtration systems, water recyclers, and instrument panels. These biofilms are microbial fortresses. They are notoriously resistant to antibiotics and standard cleaning agents, as the slimy matrix protects the cells nestled deep within. On a spacecraft where every surface is part of a closed life support loop, a thriving biofilm is not just a cleaning nuisance, it is a direct threat to system functionality and crew health. The danger this creates is exponential. A spacecraft is the ultimate closed environment. The air is recycled, the water is reclaimed, and the same few people share every cubic inch of space for months or years. There is no way to open a window, no hospital to visit, and medical supplies are severely limited. A simple urinary tract infection, a case of food poisoning, or a persistent fungal skin infection that would be a minor inconvenience on Earth with easy access to a clinic and a pharmacy could rapidly escalate into a debilitating crisis. The pathogen might be stronger, the biofilm might be protecting it from the onboard antiseptics, and the crew's own immune systems are already under stress from radiation and the psychological strain. An illness that spreads could sideline key personnel, consume precious medical resources, and in a worst-case scenario, force an abort or lead to tragedy far from any help. Every sneeze, every cough in that metal can take on a new weight. The mission, therefore, must fight on two biological fronts, sustaining the human crew while simultaneously waging a silent war against the enhanced versions of the microscopic life they brought with them from home. How do you quarantine a germ when there is nowhere else to go? The isolation of a spacecraft is not just physical, it is also informational, a growing silence in the wires that connect explorers to home. This is the creeping danger of communication lag, a delay that turns every conversation into a stilted echo and transforms an emergency into a solitary trial. The problem is dictated by the unbreakable speed limit of the universe, the speed of light. Radio signals, our only lifeline, take time to travel the vast distances between planets. From the Moon, the lag is a brief but noticeable 1.3 seconds each way, enough to make a conversation feel awkward, like talking on a satellite phone with a persistent hiccup. But as we push farther, that delay stretches into a chasm. For a spacecraft at Mars, when the planets are at their average distance, the one-way travel time for a signal is about 13 minutes. At their farthest separation, it can exceed 20 minutes. This means a simple question from an astronaut. "Houston, we have an alarm on panel 4. What should we check?" Would take 20 minutes to reach Earth. The answer, "Try cycling the breaker on Module 7. Would take another 20 minutes to come back. In total, 40 minutes of silence and uncertainty would pass before the crew could even attempt the first troubleshooting step. In a crisis involving a fire, a rapid depressurization, or a medical emergency, 40 minutes is a lifetime. Mission Control, with all its collective expertise and supercomputers, is rendered a historical archive, offering advice on a situation that unfolded long ago. The crew is utterly on their own, forced to diagnose, decide, and act with no real-time guidance, carrying the weight of survival solely on their shoulders. This operational burden is compounded periodically by a total blackout. When Mars and Earth align on opposite sides of the Sun, an event called solar conjunction, our star's raging plasma interferes with radio signals. For roughly 2 weeks, reliable communication becomes impossible. The spacecraft enters a forced silence, a pre-programmed safe mode, where it performs only basic functions, and the crew enters a period of profound autonomy. They cannot report problems, receive new instructions, or even get a reassuring message from family. They are a tiny, independent island of humanity, completely severed from the rest of their species, orbiting a distant world while their home is hidden behind a wall of solar fire. This transforms spaceflight from a remotely guided mission into a true voyage of discovery, where the crew must become their own mission controllers, doctors, and engineers. The psychological shift is monumental, moving from a team of hundreds of thousands supporting you to a team of perhaps 4 or 5 with no safety net below. Can a small group of humans, trained for years but still human, hold together when the comforting voice from home falls silent for weeks and every decision, right or wrong, is irrevocably their own? An unthinkable medical emergency becomes a nightmare of physics when gravity vanishes. Imagine a surgeon, their hands steady with years of training, now facing an operation where the very rules of their craft are broken. In zero gravity, a simple incision does not produce a neat trickle of blood. Instead, it releases floating spheres of crimson, hovering globules that can obscure the surgical field, drift into instruments, or coat the inside of a helmet visor. Every tool released for a moment does not clatter onto a tray. It silently drifts away, becoming a lost or even hazardous projectile in the confined cabin. The surgeon themselves must be physically anchored, strapped into a station, their own movements fighting against Newton's third law, where every push and pull threatens to send them spinning away from their patient. This is the terrifying reality of space surgery, a discipline where controlling the environment is as critical as controlling the scalpel. The risks multiply in the sterile, compromised world of a spacecraft. A single escaped droplet of blood or tissue could become a source of contamination, floating into air vents or settling in unreachable corners, seeding infection in a habitat where germs already pose an enhanced threat. Medical facilities are, by necessity, brutally limited. A spacecraft might have a small medical kit, some basic diagnostic tools, and perhaps a single crew member with advanced medical training, but they are no hospital. There is no operating room, no team of specialists, no blood bank, and no option for a lengthy recovery. A burst appendix, a severe trauma from an accident, or a complex internal bleed could quickly outstrip the crew's ability to respond. Research is pushing the boundaries of possibility. Scientists are testing specialized surgical enclosures, clear plastic tents that can be placed over a patient to contain fluids. There is promising work in robotic surgery, where a machine's precise, tremor-free arms could be controlled by a surgeon on Earth, but that brings us back to the communication lag. A 13-minute delay makes real-time telesurgery impossible for Mars missions. The robot would have to operate with pre-programmed autonomy, a staggering technological leap. Telemedicine can guide a crew medic through procedures, but it is just enhanced advice, not a substitute for a skilled surgeon's hands in the moment. For all our advances in life support and radiation shielding, the human body's vulnerability to sudden illness or injury remains one of the most profound and unsolved dangers. A long-duration crew is a gamble, betting that no one will suffer a medical crisis that the limited tools, the confined space, and the absence of gravity cannot overcome. The question hangs in the sterile air of the spacecraft. What happens when the greatest threat is not outside the hull, but a familiar failure within the fragile biology of an explorer? Fire in space is a terror beyond any earthly flame, a chemical reaction that defies our most basic instincts for survival. The starkest warning came not in the void, but on the launch pad with the Apollo 1 tragedy. During a routine test, a spark in the pure oxygen atmosphere of the command module ignited a fire that spread with horrifying speed. In that pressurized, enriched environment, materials that would normally smolder became explosive. The crew, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were gone in seconds, trapped behind a hatch that could not be opened against the intense internal pressure. That catastrophic lesson reshaped spaceflight, forcing a shift away from pure oxygen at high pressure and a relentless drive for fire-resistant materials. Yet the danger evolved as we moved into orbit. Fire in microgravity is a stranger, more insidious creature. On Earth, flames are familiar. They rise upward in a teardrop shape as hot air expands and becomes less dense, creating the convection currents that feed a fire oxygen and draw it toward ceilings. In the weightlessness of a spacecraft, that convection vanishes. A flame becomes a dormant blue sphere, a ghostly orb of chemical reaction hovering around its fuel source. It does not roar upward, it sits and consumes, radiating heat in all directions equally. This makes it deceptively hard to detect, as smoke does not rise to cluster around ceiling sensors. It simply expands in a growing, toxic cloud throughout the cabin. Fighting such a fire is a counterintuitive battle. You cannot aim an extinguisher at the base of the flames because there is no base. The spherical fire must be surrounded or flooded. Spacecraft carry specialized extinguishers that release a fine mist or foam designed to smother the chemical reaction in the absence of gravity to direct it. Modern stations like the ISS use a carefully controlled air mixture closer to what we breathe on Earth to reduce flammability, and every piece of fabric, wire, and plastic is scrutinized for its fire resistance. But for all these precautions, the ultimate reality remains chillingly simple. On a spacecraft, there is nowhere to run. A fire, even a small one, produces smoke and toxic fumes like carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide from burning synthetic materials. In a sealed, recycled atmosphere, that poison cannot be vented quickly without sacrificing precious breathable air. A crew might put the flames out, only to be slowly asphyxiated by the invisible aftermath, with no window to open, no door to step through, and the infinite vacuum waiting just on the other side of the hull. Every procedure, every material choice is a prayer against a spark in a world where you cannot ever truly escape the smoke. The threat of malnutrition haunts every long voyage, but in space it takes on a uniquely sinister form. Even if you pack enough calories for a multi-year mission to Mars, the food itself can turn against you, its nutritional value silently leaching away into the void. This is the slow crisis of nutrient degradation, where the very chemistry of sustenance is undone by the space environment. The primary culprit is once again the relentless cosmic radiation. High-energy particles do not just damage human cells, they smash into the molecular structure of vitamins in stored food. Sensitive nutrients like vitamin C, the B vitamins, and folate are particularly vulnerable, breaking down over time. You could have a sealed package of food that looks perfectly fine, smells normal, and provides ample energy, yet be completely devoid of the essential compounds that prevent diseases like scurvy, beriberi, or anemia. On a 2- or 3-year Mars mission, an astronaut could be consuming what amounts to empty calories for months, their body stores of these vitamins dwindling until deficiency symptoms begin to appear, millions of miles from any resupply or medical intervention capable of treating them. This stark reality forces a shift from simply packing meals to creating a self-sustaining biosphere. The logical answer seems to be growing fresh food on board, a source of living vitamins and a profound psychological boost. But farming in space introduces a new web of dangers. The closed environment of a growth chamber is a paradise for mold and pathogens. The constant warmth, humidity, and nutrient-rich conditions intended for lettuce or tomatoes are equally ideal for fungal blooms and bacterial outbreaks that could devastate a crop. A single fungal spire, invisible to the eye, could spread through an entire hydroponic system, forcing a crew to destroy their food supply and face potential contamination of the life support system itself. Furthermore, plants grown in microgravity exhibit strange behaviors, their roots wandering in confused patterns and their stems sometimes growing in weak, disoriented spirals. We are still learning if these space-grown plants produce the same nutrient density as their Earth-bound counterparts, or if the stress of the environment alters their own biochemical makeup. The dream of a fresh salad on Mars is therefore a complex engineering and biological puzzle, a balance between providing life-giving nourishment and cultivating a potential vector for disease in an environment where neither can be easily escaped. The dinner plate becomes a critical front in the mission's survival, asking whether we can build a garden that feeds the body without poisoning the closed, fragile world we must carry with us. The body's defenses are quietly dismantling themselves from the inside. Among the most alarming medical discoveries from long-duration spaceflight is a profound and dangerous dysregulation of the human immune system. In the void, your body's intricate network of cellular defenders begins to falter, behaving not like a well-trained army, but like a confused and weary militia. Research reveals this shift mirrors the natural weakening that comes with aging, a form of accelerated immunosenescence triggered by the combined assault of microgravity, radiation, and chronic stress. Key players in this defense, the T cells that identify and destroy infected cells, become sluggish and less responsive. They struggle to proliferate and launch an effective counterattack, leaving the body vulnerable to threats it would normally shrug off. This vulnerability is horrifyingly demonstrated by the reactivation of latent viruses. Astronauts often show signs of viruses like Epstein-Barr or the chickenpox virus, varicella zoster, flaring back to life, conditions that had lain dormant in their nerve cells since childhood. In space, with a weakened immune surveillance, these viruses can reawaken, potentially causing shingles or other complications, a literal ghost of illnesses past coming back to haunt them. Now remember the enhanced microbes from earlier, the bacteria growing more virulent and forming stubborn biofilms. This creates the perfect storm for illness. You have a crew living in a sealed, recycled environment, the ultimate petri dish, now populated by tougher, more infectious germs. And standing guard at the gate is an immune system that is functionally older, slower, and less capable than it was on Earth. A simple cold could linger for weeks, a minor infection could become systemic, and the risk of sepsis from a routine injury skyrockets. The spacecraft, designed as a sanctuary, becomes the most germ-ridden environment an astronaut will ever experience, while their primary biological shield is quietly eroding. This forces a dire question for a mission to Mars. Can we keep a crew healthy for years when their own bodies are betraying their most basic defense against a world of invisible enemies? Every breath, every sip of water, and every meal aboard a spacecraft comes with an inescapable biological consequence, a growing mountain of human waste. For a crew of 4 on a 3-year mission to Mars, the numbers are staggering. They would generate over 2,000 kilograms of solid waste and thousands of liters of urine. In the closed ecosystem of a spacecraft, this is not merely a sanitation issue. It is a critical logistical puzzle and a persistent biological hazard. The solution is a technological marvel born of necessity: water recycling. On the International Space Station, sophisticated systems reclaim about 90% of the water from crew urine and sweat, even pulling moisture from the cabin air itself. It is a closed-loop alchemy that turns yesterday's coffee into tomorrow's drinking water, a process vital for survival when every drop must be carried from Earth at astronomical cost. But this system is a double-edged sword of incredible fragility. The machinery is a complex labyrinth of filters, distillation chambers, and chemical processes that must work flawlessly for years. A single major failure, a pump seizure, or a bacterial clog in the lines does not just mean a return to using stored water. It could mean the sudden loss of the primary water supply. The crew would face an immediate, severe water rationing crisis with no way to manufacture more, a countdown to dehydration measured in days. Furthermore, the system itself concentrates biological hazards. If a pathogen or a virulent biofilm, like those we discussed earlier, establishes itself inside the recycling hardware, it could potentially be spread through the entire drinking water supply, turning the life-saving system into a vector for disease. Then there is the solid waste. It cannot be simply jettisoned, as it would become hazardous orbital debris. Instead, it is compacted, dried, and stored on board for the duration of the mission. In a confined habitat, this presents a constant, low-level hygiene challenge. The storage containers must be perfectly sealed against odors and microbial escape, yet they must be accessed regularly. Any breach, any handling error, introduces the risk of contamination into the living space, a risk that grows over the many months of a long voyage. The crew must live and work mere feet from a sealed repository of their own biological refuse, a stark and unpleasant reminder of the body's relentless processes, and a ticking logistical bomb if its management ever fails. The sterile hum of machinery becomes a prison for the senses. Beyond the profound isolation, a more subtle psychological danger sets in, a slow starvation of the mind caused by relentless monotony and sensory deprivation. Imagine living for months, even years, inside a series of gray metal tubes. Every wall is the same hard surface, every smell is the familiar tang of recycled air and antiseptic, and every sound is the constant, low-frequency drone of fans, pumps, and computers. There is no wind on your face, no scent of rain, no texture of grass underfoot, and no horizon that changes with the weather. Your world is a fixed, artificial box hurtling through an infinite black void. This sensory desert is not just boring, it is neurologically corrosive. The human brain thrives on novelty and varied input to stay alert and engaged. Without it, attention spans fracture, motivation plummets, and the risk of clinical depression rises sharply. In such an environment, even minor tasks can feel Sisyphean, and critical vigilance can wane, leading to dangerous lapses in judgment or procedure. A bored, detached astronaut might miss a subtle alarm indicator, skip a step in a vital maintenance checklist, or make a rash decision out of sheer mental frustration. The mission's success and the crew's survival depends on minds that remain sharp and engaged. To combat this insidious decay, space agencies have turned the spacecraft interior into a battleground for the senses. Lighting systems now simulate a natural day-night cycle, shifting color temperature from cool blues in the morning to warm ambers in the evening, helping regulate circadian rhythms. But the fight goes deeper. Crews are deliberately equipped with what might seem like luxuries, but are in fact critical psychological tools. A simple guitar, a set of watercolor paints, or a collection of books provides not just distraction but essential cognitive variety. The act of strumming a chord creates a new sound, mixing paint offers a visual and tactile experience, and reading a novel transports the mind to an entirely different world. Hobbies are not downtime, they are maintenance for human cognition. Routines are also carefully varied, breaking the monotony with surprise meals, scheduled video events with families, and even themed movie nights. Some experiments are testing virtual reality as the ultimate escape hatch, allowing an astronaut to spend 30 minutes walking through a simulated forest, hearing birds and feeling a virtual breeze, a powerful trick to reset a starved brain. The goal is to inject unpredictability and richness into an environment designed for sterile efficiency, understanding that a healthy mind requires more than just oxygen and calories. It needs a diet of wonder, creativity, and change to keep from turning inward and crumbling in the silence. Even the journey away from our planet forces a passage through a gauntlet of our own making. Encircling Earth like a pair of colossal, invisible donuts are the Van Allen radiation belts, zones of intense radiation held in place by our planet's magnetic field. These are not empty space, they are dense soups of charged particles, protons and electrons, trapped in a perpetual high-speed dance between the magnetic poles. For any spacecraft aiming for the moon or the planets, there is no way around them, only through. The belts are structured in two main zones, an inner belt of high-energy protons and an outer belt of energetic electrons, with a hazardous slot region between them. While passing through these belts adds only a short period of exposure compared to the years of a deep space mission, perhaps an hour or two for a carefully planned trajectory, it delivers a concentrated, unavoidable spike of radiation. The dose is significant, adding to an astronaut's lifetime risk and posing a threat to sensitive electronics. This very danger fueled one of the most persistent conspiracy theories about the Apollo moon landings, the claim that astronauts could not have survived the trip through the belts. The reality is a testament to precise engineering and navigation. Mission planners mapped the belts meticulously, identifying the thinnest regions. The Apollo spacecraft were launched on a trajectory that took them through the less dense equatorial region of the belts, and they traveled at such high velocity that their transit time was minimized. The spacecraft hull itself provided a modest but critical shield for the brief passage. The astronauts received a dose, but it was a calculated risk, a small fraction of what they would have absorbed had they lingered or passed through the belt's most intense areas. Today and for future missions, the Van Allen belts remain a dangerous but navigable obstacle course. They demand respect and careful planning, a reminder that leaving our cradle requires braving a final, natural barrier, a tempest of trapped particles that stands as Earth's last line of defense against the cosmos. The silent war inside an astronaut's body claims another vital territory, the very factory of life in their bones. Beyond muscle wasting and brittle skeletons, spaceflight triggers a hidden hematological crisis, a dangerous drop in the body's red blood cell count known as space anemia. For decades, this was considered a brief adaptation, the body efficiently shedding unneeded red blood cells because the fluid shift in microgravity increased blood volume. But recent research reveals a far more alarming truth. The anemia is not a one-time adjustment. It is a persistent state of destruction and suppressed production. In microgravity, the body appears to destroy about 54% more red blood cells than it does on Earth, a rate 3 million cells per second instead of 2 million. This relentless culling is compounded by a troubling suppression of bone marrow function, the soft tissue inside bones where new blood cells are born. The marrow seems to receive confused signals in the weightless environment, struggling to keep up with the increased rate of loss. The result is a 10 to 15% reduction in total red blood cell mass, the cells responsible for carrying life-giving oxygen from the lungs to every muscle and organ. The symptoms are the classic hallmarks of anemia, persistent fatigue, weakness, and a noticeable drop in aerobic capacity. An astronaut might find themselves short of breath after what should be routine physical tasks, their body starved for oxygen at the cellular level despite breathing normal air. This is not just an inconvenience, it is a direct threat to mission performance and safety. On a spacewalk where every movement is physically taxing and mentally demanding, debilitating fatigue could lead to a critical error. The danger reaches its peak upon return to Earth. After months in space, an astronaut's cardiovascular system is already deconditioned, with a weaker heart and lax blood vessels. Now add a significant anemia on top of that. When they stand up in Earth's gravity, their body must fight to pull blood upward to the brain against the sudden weight. With fewer red blood cells to deliver oxygen, the brain can be starved in seconds, leading to severe lightheadedness and fainting, a condition called orthostatic intolerance. Many astronauts need to be carried from their capsules, not just because their muscles are weak, but because their blood simply cannot sustain consciousness under the renewed pull of gravity. The body's attempt to readapt is a long and grueling process, taking up to 3 or 4 months for red blood cell levels to fully normalize. This hidden crisis forces us to ask, how can explorers be expected to land on Mars and immediately begin strenuous surface operations if they arrive exhausted, anemic, and physically compromised by the very journey that brought them there? Every component aboard a spacecraft is a potential Achilles heel. The greatest vessels ever built by humanity are not monolithic fortresses, but intricate, fragile ecosystems of millions of individual parts, each one a candidate for a catastrophic single-point failure. This is the engineering curse of complexity, where a tiny, inexpensive component, a valve the size of your thumb, a rubber O-ring chilled a few degrees too cold, or a single frayed wire, can unravel the work of billions of dollars and the lives of a crew. The term single-point failure describes any element whose malfunction without a backup or alternative path leads directly to mission loss. In the unforgiving theater of space, there is no roadside assistance, no ability to pull over and pop the hood. A failure is a live event unfolding in real time against the backdrop of an infinite vacuum. The haunting example is Apollo 13. The mission was not doomed by a massive explosion, but by the rupture of a single oxygen tank, tank number 2. A damaged thermostat wire inside it sparked during a routine stir, igniting the insulation and causing a pressure burst that also crippled its neighboring tank. 2 small tanks out of millions of parts transformed a lunar landing into a desperate fight for survival, forcing the crew to use their lunar module as a lifeboat. Every switch thrown after that explosion was a gamble against another hidden flaw. Redundancy is the engineer's mantra against this terror. Critical systems are duplicated, even triplicated. If one pump fails, a second takes over automatically. If a primary computer crashes, an identical backup wakes up. The International Space Station is a labyrinth of such backups, with multiple power channels, communication paths, and life support loops. Yet redundancy itself adds complexity, more parts that can fail, more switches that must work to engage the backup. Testing is therefore relentless and brutal. Components are shaken, baked, frozen, and bombarded with radiation to simulate years of abuse in a matter of weeks. But the final, terrible truth is that no amount of testing can perfectly replicate the unique, combined stresses of actual spaceflight. The launch vibrations, the thermal cycling, the atomic oxygen erosion, and the subtle, long-term where that microgravity imposes on fluids and materials. A seal that passed every ground test might slowly degrade over 18 months in orbit. A material never exposed to a particular combination of solar ultraviolet and cosmic rays might become brittle and crack. The spacecraft flies into an environment of countless unknown unknowns, where the most dangerous flaw is often the one the engineers never thought to test for. This places an immense silent burden on every mission, a prayer that among the millions of perfectly crafted parts, the one with the hidden weakness remains asleep. The fear of what we might bring back is as profound as the fear of what we might find. This is the hidden danger of planetary protection, a set of protocols designed not to shield astronauts from space, but to shield Earth from whatever they might carry home. The core principle is back contamination, the nightmare scenario of an extraterrestrial microbe, perfectly adapted to a harsh environment, hitching a ride on a returning spacecraft and finding our biosphere a defenseless paradise. While the surface of Mars appears barren and irradiated, we now know its ancient past was wet and potentially habitable, and there are subsurface niches like briny aquifers where life could persist even today. If a single, resilient Martian organism survived the journey and escaped containment, the consequences are the stuff of science fiction horror, an Andromeda-strain scenario with global stakes. Unlike an earthly invasive species against which native life has some evolutionary history, an alien microbe would be a complete unknown. Our immune systems would have no recognition of it, our antibiotics would be useless against its alien biochemistry, and it could potentially outcompete earthly bacteria in crucial ecological niches, disrupting soil health, water cycles, or even the very air we breathe. The protocols to prevent this are draconian. Any sample returned from Mars, a scoop of soil or a drilled rock core, will be treated as the most hazardous material on the planet. It will be sealed inside multiple nested containers during collection, launched from Mars inside a secure ascent vehicle, and met in Earth orbit by a return capsule designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry without breaching. Upon landing, the canister will not be opened in a standard lab. It will be transferred immediately to a maximum security biosafety facility, a BSL-4 level building with negative air pressure, airtight seals, and scientists working in full-body pressurized suits. The samples will be studied inside sealed glove boxes for years before any declaration of safety is made. For astronauts returning from the Martian surface, the quarantine would be equally severe. After their long journey home, they would not be greeted with hugs and cheers. Instead, they would be immediately isolated in a specialized receiving facility, treated as if they themselves were the sample, undergoing extensive medical monitoring and decontamination until we could be absolutely certain they carried no hidden passengers. This transforms the triumphant return of heroes into a prolonged period of medical isolation, a necessary but psychologically brutal final chapter to an already grueling voyage. The danger here is not of a monster leaping from the shadows, but of a silent, microscopic stowaway. It forces a humbling realization in our quest to explore new worlds. Our greatest responsibility may be to protect the only one we already have. Your gut is a universe of its own, a teeming inner world that holds the key to your overall health. This is the human microbiome, a community of trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses living primarily in your intestines. These are not invaders, they are essential partners. They help digest food, synthesize vitamins, train your immune system, and even influence your mood. In space, this delicate internal ecosystem is thrown into chaos. The same forces that weaken your immune system and strengthen external pathogens also wage a silent war on the beneficial life inside you. Research from astronauts returning from the International Space Station shows a troubling trend. The diversity of their gut microbiome decreases. Think of it like a rainforest being slowly clear-cut. On Earth, a rich, diverse gut flora is a sign of resilience, with many different species performing specialized jobs and keeping each other in check. In the sterile, stressful, and radiation-exposed environment of a spacecraft, that diversity plummets. The carefully balanced community begins to simplify. Some beneficial species dwindle or disappear, while other, more opportunistic and potentially harmful bacteria find an opening to expand their territory. This shift is not a minor digestive footnote. The gut microbiome is in constant communication with the immune system, essentially teaching it what to attack and what to leave alone. When that microbial community becomes impoverished and imbalanced, it sends confusing signals. This dysbiosis, the disruption of the microbiome, is directly linked to the immune dysfunction we discussed earlier. A weakened, less diverse gut flora cannot properly regulate the immune response, leaving the body both overreactive to harmless stimuli and underreactive to genuine threats. It creates a perfect internal storm. An astronaut is now facing enhanced external germs with an immune system already compromised by microgravity and radiation, and now their primary internal ally, their microbiome, is also failing them. This turns every meal, every moment of stress into a potential internal crisis. The food they eat, even if perfectly nutritious, might not be processed effectively by a diminished microbial workforce. The result could be nutrient malabsorption, inflammation, and a heightened susceptibility to infection from both inside and out. The danger is profound because it is so foundational. We might send explorers to Mars with the most advanced shielding and life support, only to have their mission undermined by a collapse within their own biology, a quiet rebellion in the gut that leaves them vulnerable to every other danger the cosmos can throw at them. How do you fortify an invisible world that you are only beginning to understand? While we shield against the sun's violent outbursts, a quieter, more persistent stream flows from it constantly. This is the solar wind, a steady breeze of charged particles, mostly protons and electrons, blowing outward from the sun at over 1 million miles per hour. It is not a storm, but a ceaseless, invisible sandblaster, and its effects are measured not in hours but in millennia. For a planet like Earth, our robust magnetic field acts as a deflector shield, channeling this wind safely around us and creating the auroras at the poles. But worlds without a global magnetic field, like the Moon or Mars, are naked to this relentless flow. The solar wind strikes their surfaces directly, and over astonishing spans of time, it fundamentally changes the land itself. This process is called space weathering. On the airless Moon, these high-energy particles embed themselves in the top layer of soil, the regolith. They break apart the crystalline structure of minerals, creating tiny glassy coatings and nanophase iron. This is why the lunar surface appears so dark and why moon rocks brought back by the Apollo astronauts look different from the soil still on the Moon. The solar wind had not yet weathered the pristine interiors. This alteration is more than a color change. It affects the soil's chemical properties, its ability to hold volatile elements, and even how it clumps together. For a future lunar base, this means the very ground you build on is not static. It is a material being continuously processed by an invisible force. The erosion is slow, perhaps only 1 millimeter every million years, but for any permanent structure meant to last decades or centuries, it is a factor that cannot be ignored. More immediately, the solar wind poses a direct threat to the surfaces of spacecraft and equipment left outside. For satellites in high Earth orbit or probes on long journeys, this constant bombardment can gradually degrade external materials. It can darken and cloud transparent surfaces like lens covers or solar panel glass, reducing their efficiency. It can cause the slow release of atoms from metal alloys, a process called sputtering, which over many years could weaken thin structural films or alter the thermal properties of critical coatings. A spacecraft on a multi-decade mission to the outer solar system, or a telescope parked at a stable point like James Webb, must have its materials engineered to withstand this ceaseless, gentle abrasion from the star it studies. The challenge is one of patience versus persistence. We design for the sudden, catastrophic event, but must also account for the whisper-thin stream of particles that, given enough time, can subtly reshape a world and silently wear down our machine. How do you build a legacy on a landscape that is being slowly rewritten by a wind you cannot feel? The lifeline connecting an astronaut to home is woven from more than just data and supplies. It is a fragile thread of meaning. Every breath of recycled air, every bite of rehydrated food, every encouraging message from mission control all whisper the same quiet truth. Your survival is entirely dependent on a single, distant planet. This creates a profound psychological dependency, a womb effect where Earth is not just home, but the sole source of life and moral sustenance. The spacecraft, for all its complexity, is merely an umbilical cord. Now imagine that cord is suddenly, silently severed, not by a technical failure in space, but by a catastrophe on the ground. During a multi-year mission to Mars, news reaches the crew that a global pandemic has spiraled beyond control or that a major conflict has broken out. The regular, reassuring updates from mission control grow sporadic, then stop altogether. The live video feeds from families go dark. The crew is left orbiting another world, listening to the static hiss of a silent radio, with no way of knowing who is left, what has happened, or if the world they knew even exists anymore. This is a unique and paralyzing form of existential dread. Their entire purpose, their reason for being millions of miles away, is tied to a civilization that may now be in ruins. Every experiment they conduct, every photo they beam back, suddenly feels meaningless if there is no one left to receive it. They are utterly abandoned, not by choice but by circumstance, floating in a tin can with a lifetime supply of nothing but questions. The stress is compounded by a terrible helplessness. On Earth, in a crisis, you can act, you can fight, flee, or help others. An astronaut in deep space has no such agency. They cannot rush home. The laws of orbital mechanics dictate a return window many months away. They cannot aid in the recovery, offer comfort to loved ones, or even get reliable information. They are forced spectators to the potential end of their world, with a front row seat to the void. Their survival becomes a bitter irony, sustained by the very technology of a society that may have collapsed. This transforms their mission from a noble exploration into a potential ghost ship's voyage, where they are preserving a record of a culture that has vanished. The psychological weight of this dependence and the terror of its rupture adds a final, crushing layer to the isolation of space. It asks whether the human mind can bear the responsibility of representing all of humanity, when the only evidence of humanity left might be the four faces staring back from inside a helmet visor. The final and perhaps most profound danger is not a list item to be checked, but the canvas upon which all the others are painted. It is the void itself, not as a collection of hazards, but as a state of being. Space represents the ultimate cosmic indifference. It does not harbor malice, it does not plot or scheme. It simply is a breathtaking expanse of vacuum, radiation, and cold that operates on laws utterly unconcerned with the fragile phenomenon of life. This philosophical truth gives weight to every technical peril we have named. The radiation that shreds DNA, the vacuum that boils blood, the silence that starves the mind, these are not attacks. They are simply the default conditions of reality beyond our tiny oasis. Human existence is a beautiful, temporary accident in a universe where the norms are crushing pressures, deadly temperatures, and absolute emptiness. Our ventures into the cosmos, then, are not a natural progression. They are a rebellion. Each mission, from a satellite's first orbit to a future footprint on Mars, is a deliberate, calculated act of defiance against this indifference. We wrap ourselves in fragile bubbles of engineered atmosphere. We hide behind shields of water and plastic, and we send our minds into a sensory desert, all to proclaim that we will not be confined to the garden. But the gamble is absolute. Every bolt tightened, every algorithm written, every heartbeat monitored is a wager against an opponent that does not know it is playing. The void does not fight fair because it does not fight at all, it merely persists, and in that persistence lies its ultimate power. To step into space is to accept that your survival is a temporary exception to the universe's rules, a flicker of warmth in an eternal cold, maintained by will, ingenuity, and constant, unyielding vigilance. Our journey outward is the story of life staring into the abyss and deciding to build a lantern. From the silent war within ourselves to the violent storms raging on the sun, the panorama of cosmic danger is both terrifying and fascinating. We have journeyed through a landscape where a speck of dust is a bullet, where silence can crush the mind, and where our own biology becomes a quiet saboteur. These are not mere obstacles, they are fundamental truths about the universe we seek to enter. Yet, to catalogue these 25 hidden dangers is not an exercise in fear or a reason to abandon the dream. It is precisely the opposite. Understanding the sheer scale and creativity of these threats is the only way we can possibly hope to survive them. It is a testament to the breathtaking courage of every astronaut who straps into a spacecraft and to the relentless ingenuity of the engineers who design their fragile bubbles of life. They do not ignore the void's indifference, they meet it with calculation, with redundancy, and with raw human will. Each mission is a declaration that we will learn the rules of this hostile new ocean, and then we will build a ship that can sail it. As we set our sights on Mars and beyond, facing these hidden dangers head-on is what will separate science fiction from science fact. Which danger surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of the cosmos.